So before I talk about the GUI interface, I first want to talk about what it means to go into source space. For those of you who haven't heard that term before, I think it will be very important to understand what it means to go into source space to help you get a better intuition of what is being done inside the GUI as well as what it's outputting. So just for context, for this tutorial, I'm going to be talking about an MEG experiment. So that's recording the magnetic fields around the head. Okay, so to help us better understand what source space is, let's look at the actual MEG. And that looks like this helmet here, which I can't draw in 3D. And this helmet has a bunch of sensors that go all around. And let's say this is our head that we have here with our lovely happy participant. So each sensor is measuring the magnetic field. So in your initial data, each sensor is going to have a current associated with each sensor. And we call this sensor space. So whenever we're looking at data in sensor space, let's look at a specific sensor. Let's say this sensor here. This sensor is going to be picking up brain activity from this region here, and also a little bit from this region over here. And the sensor here might also be picking up some activity from this brain region here, and maybe a little bit from this region over here. So you can see from this that there's always some mixing that's happening, and each sensor isn't corresponding to a specific brain region. So what if you did want to look at a specific brain region? And that's where the term source space comes in. So instead of looking at the activity at each sensor, we can look at the activity in the brain. And we can do this either through looking at it across the surface of the brain or looking at it volumetrically. So in order to move from sensor space to source space, we use something called the inverse solution. In order to do this operation, we need two things. The first is that we need to know the shape of the brain, and we can potentially get that from an MRI, but if we don't have an MRI, that's still okay. We can estimate it. The second thing is that we need to know the location of the person's head inside the helmet. And I think that people often overlook this detail, but I think that it is actually very important. You can kind of imagine why it's important, because if a person's head is tilted, let's say this sensor here is picking up activity from this brain region here, and if I tilt this head slightly, then you can see how the estimation of the brain activity may change. But this isn't to say that the brain needs to be straight on. It just needs to be in an accurate location in order to get an accurate estimation of the brain activity. So the GUI interface is very helpful because it helps us determine the location of the person's head inside the MEG helmet. And if we don't have an MRI, it can also help us estimate the shape and size of the brain.